if you look at the figures and you look at the world around, we find there are collapsing markets. There are massive number of people being dispossessed out of their houses. There are giants of finance which are collapsing all over the place, and unemployment is, with each passing day, getting to be a very huge problem even by the standards of capitalism. And if in the rich countries people are losing their jobs, in the poor third world countries people are literally losing their lives because there's no social safety net in these countries. And yet we were told until recently globalization is lifting millions of people out of poverty. Well, just as it might have temporarily lifted some people out of poverty, it is now plunging them back into even deeper poverty than before. Unless and until society organizes itself on a completely different basis, they'll continue to suffer. As a result of the various write-downs consequent upon the financial crisis, $1,000 billion worth of losses had to be written down by the world's major banks. And the whole face of banking has changed. Until 2 years ago, if you looked at the list of the 50 largest banks in the world, they were all centered somewhere in the United States, in Western Europe, in Japan, etc. If you look at the list now, the 3 largest banks are now Chinese. You know, the economic power, if you like, is shifting away from the old capitalist countries. Today, if you look at the market valuation of the banks, it's not even 10% of what it was 10 years ago. Large banks have become bankrupt. In Britain, for example, the Royal Bank of Scotland is nearly 80% owned by the government. 68% of Lloyd TSB, which only foolishly recently rescued HBOS, is now owned by the government. Barclays owners are considering whether to accept government help or not. And I think the only British bank which is somewhat safer now is the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. In America, Citibank, which was the largest bank in the world, which had a market capitalization of $230 or $40 billion, is worth today something like $10, $15 billion. And that too only because so much of government money has been pumped into it.
Sorry, which was that last bank?
Sorry?
Which was that last bank?
Citibank.
Oh, Citi.
Citibank. If you want to actually consider the crisis of overproduction, you can take it industry by industry. But let me just give you an example from one industry, and that's the car industry. People around the world now, as a result of this crisis, are replacing their vehicles less often than they did before. In the United States, the average age of the trade-ins now has soared to 75 months. And that's over 6 years. You keep your vehicle for 6 years. Now, in a decent society, if you had to have a private car, and I don't see why you have to have a private car anyway, but if you had a private car, one of the things that you will brag about is, my car lasted me a lifetime. Why do you need to change the car? Because car producers need to sell their cars regularly. That's the only way they can make a profit. If you never ever replace cars, there'll be heck of a slump straight away. But the very fact that the trade-in time has now soared to 75 months as opposed to 62 months in 3 years ago in 2006 means that it has a huge multiplier effect on the manufacture and sale of cars. And the result is that since October 2008, US car sales have been lower than the average scrappage rate of about 12.4 million vehicles. Every year, 12.4 million vehicles in America are scrapped. They're taken away to some place where they're dumped. And people are not replacing that, which means fewer cars are being bought than are being scrapped. And the first time in a country which prided itself on the car culture, which prided itself on by saying that the ownership of more and more cars was the hallmark of freedom, you have now people who are using the roads less than they did even 2 or 3 years ago. And America is a country of sound bites and slogans. Frugalism is the new cool in America. Not spending money, not shop till you drop, but actually being frugal. That's the new cool. Now that spells death for capitalism. Frugal? Are you a friend of capitalism or an enemy? You're worse than a Bolshevik if you're frugal. So frugalism is the new cool. Now before the credit crisis, it was assumed that in a normal year, the United States sold, in the United States, 16 to 17 million units of cars were sold. And some were expecting that it will very soon reach the figure of 20 million. Now sales are running at an annual rate of little more than 10 million, which is the lowest since 1982 when the American population was much smaller. And globally, car production fell last year to 62.2 million units from 68.9 million in a mere year earlier, that's in 2007. And it will fall further in 2009 to 59 million, which really means that from 69 to 59 million, 10 million vehicles, fewer vehicles will be produced in 2009 than they were in 2006. And you can see what effect it will have on the economies of every country where cars are produced on a huge basis. And there are many countries where cars are produced on an extensive scale, not only in Western Europe, not only in the United States, not only in Japan, but in Asia as well, Brazil as well. So this will have an effect. According to the International Monetary Fund, global economic growth is now projected in 2009 to be a mere 0.5%. This would be the lowest. In a normal year, global production increases by an average of 3, 4, 5%. And it's the first time that it will increase by just 0.5%. And it may not increase at all. Considering how often these estimates have been revised in the last few months downwards, it is to be expected that this estimate itself is subject to further revision. In just one quarter in the United States of America, 4 million jobs were lost, and jobs continue being lost. American rate of unemployment now stands at over 7%, and it's the similar position in a number of other countries. President Obama's administration has proposed a stimulus of $787 billion. In no way is it considered sufficient that it will put the demand into the economy, which will be able to revive it, if you like. Although it's bankrupting the US Treasury, it's not considered sufficient. Incidentally, when the governments of the major imperialist countries and the ideologues and commentators ask for demand to be put into the economy, what is it if not an indirect way of admitting it's a crisis of overproduction? They do not like to use that expression because they no longer will be able to say Marxian economics is dead, that Marxism is dead. And that is, it's very important that among the two hostile classes, the exploited and the exploiters, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, there is fight over everything. Not only over the kind of society each one of us wants, not only over the question of economics, not only over the question of philosophy, but even the question of terminology. Capitalist exploitation is referred to as free market. Liberalism, if you like, it is anything but liberalism in the genuine sense of the word. This extreme form of this liberalism is fascism, but even when it's not fascistic, it subjects working people to the torments of normal hunger, unemployment, homelessness, and general destitution.